Hi everyone, welcome to week 21 for the Premier League season. I'm your host David Barbash on the Global Sports Channel's Football Show. Got two great guests today. Joining us for the show from last week, we have Mike Sutton. I'm glad to welcome Mike back, owner of the Auckland Huskies, the basketball team in New Zealand, right now Melbourne Knights. And one of my longtime friends, grew up with in Leeds, England, Richard Stevens, who will be speaking to us live from just outside London in the UK. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, Dave.
Good to see you, Rich, and good to see you, Mike.
Thanks, Dave. Good to be back, mate. And I'd just like to give a shout out to my other great love outside of Arsenal is my Surfside Waves soccer club in Ocean Grove that I'm lucky enough to be the president of. And
nice.
Big year coming up as we progress into Men's State League and have full teams already ready to go for the season. So just want to get that out there, mate.
Yeah, well, you know what? Have there any social media? Can people follow your team on social media?
Oh, absolutely. We are all over it. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, just Surfside Waves, at Surfside Waves. And you'll get the update from the best club on the Bellarine Peninsula by a long way. All the other clubs will not agree with me, but it's my show in that sense.
We love it. So check out Surfside Waves. We wish you the best for the upcoming season. I know a lot of delays in sport with COVID and outside football right now. It's going to be interesting to see what happens at the Aussie Open right by you in Melbourne. I know Andy Murray just is flying back to the UK, given the lack of practice time because of some of the lockdowns. So it's going to be interesting. And then, of course, in the summer with Tokyo, whether that goes ahead. So interesting. What are your thoughts before we dive into the football about the Aussie Open and some of the things that have been happening in the last week or so?
I was going to say, as you know, today all non-elite sport is non-existent, unfortunately, here in the UK as we enjoy lockdown number 3. Very frustrating for the grassroots. My boys both playing football and cricket, can't play anything at the moment. Really frustrating. And that's the way it is for the foreseeable future. We've still got a few weeks. Looks like the numbers are, are coming down a little bit, but it's going to take a long time for us to get where the likes of Australia and New Zealand have managed to get to, and congratulations to them for operating a very good closed door policy that I think really helped them and didn't particularly help us. But this is not a political forum, this is a sport forum.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for the input, Rich.
That's all good, Mum.
Let's move on, actually, because I think we're all here, we're dialed in, guys, for the review for the week, and we had a ton of games. We had games on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. We're going to go through all the games, we're going to go through all the scores, but we're going to give you specific, more in-depth reviews on certain games. Some surprising, some not surprising. A lot of goals scored this week. Let's dive right into it. So Tuesday, we started off with Crystal Palace against West Ham. Crystal Palace, the hosts, they were playing West Ham. Wilfred Zaha puts the Hammers behind. Crystal Palace took the lead in the 3rd minute, and it was 1-0 Crystal Palace, and you thought Palace could be shocking what is being a hot Hammers side lately. But 6 minutes later, Tomas Souček scored to equalise for West Ham, and he put them back up 2-1, scoring his brace in the 25th minute, 2-1 at half-time. Craig Dawson made it 3-1 to the Hammers in the 65th minute in the second half. And Michy Batshuayi made it in the 97th minute, 3-2, but to no avail to Crystal Palace. They end up losing the game. West Ham, guys, they take all 3 points. What big advances do you see in this side? I'm going to kick it over to Mike first. get your impression of whether you think David Moyes has really made this side progress. When you look at the league standings, you say, obviously, he's made them progress. But what is it about this David Moyes side that keeps them in the top half of the table?
Oh, first of all, I think Thomas Souček is proving himself to be an outstanding player. And I think he in clubs like that, you need those 1, 2, 3 guys who are just outstanding talents. And that's prevalent across a couple of clubs at the moment, which we no doubt we'll get to. And Dawson, a great foil as well, and also putting goals away. So I think with David Moyes, like it's kind of like the culmination of all of his travels and all of his experience coming out with a young, hungry, and some experienced squad at West Ham, who were gone a couple of years ago, and they've just got that balance right at the moment between a couple of guys who are flying individually, and then keeping the game really progressing forward.
Yeah, and what's your, and I agree to that extent, because I think Thomas Souček, and maybe Richard remembers this when we played them, he had that towering header that we're not good against set pieces, and Thomas Souček, you could see that he's an aerial threat and he's a physical presence, and I think he's made a difference for them. He scored a brace in the game. What is your take, Rich, on West Ham and under David Moyes this season? They've got some threats up front. Mikel Antonio, who was missing at the beginning of the season, he's been pretty strong up front, along with Pabnal, Fornals, and one of the players that we wanted to sign on loan or permanent at Leeds, we didn't get him. Saeed Ben Rama just signed in the transfer window. He just signed for them on a permanent transfer. What is your take on West Ham so far for the season?
I think Moyes, he's always been a bit of an up and down manager. I think he had a little break and then he came back to West Ham with a bit of a renewed fight, and he had an opportunity with a team that was kind of going down, and I think it was a bit of we haven't got much to lose here. He's made a couple of good signings. Antonio, he's a class finisher and he's a class player, and he's made a massive difference. I don't know what's going to happen to Declan Rice, but I think with the recent loan signing of Jesse Lingard from Man U, I think he's going to bring a bit of top quality experience to the ranks as well. And I think he's just gotten playing good, just basic good football with some threats up front. And as you say, Souček is a great player. When you go to Crystal Palace, Hodgson has got a pretty good organised team there. So to be able to break down, score 3 goals away from home against a very organised defence that Hodgson's always mastered pretty well. They must have done their homework, Moyes and his backroom staff, about what the methodology will be to break that defence down. He's got the right players, and he's got them firing. I don't know what's going to happen to Declan Rice. There was some rumours that he might be off. I don't know whether he's going to, because he's a great player. He is a really good player. He keeps them. He's a bit of an engine room. Keeps the unit together. But with the aerial threat and Antonio, that's the reason why I think West Ham are doing well. And of course, what you play, it's all about confidence, as we know that. When you play with a bit of momentum, you either believe you're going to lose if you've had a bad run, and then a bit of luck might change and you believe they're going to win. And I think what's happened to them is they believe they're going to win now, and they're on a roll. And they got up to 3rd or 4th, and now about 5th or 6th. But they're going to be really challenging for some form of European place this year.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the end of the games at the end of the week, you'll see them rise to 5th place, and so they're in the mix right now, in the hunt for the European places. I like also Jared Bowen. I don't think gets enough credit. I think him and Ben Rama is temperamental, has a good game, has a bad game, but I think Bowen, the pace that he brings, the whipped in crosses, and as you both mentioned, the strength, I think, of Mikel Antonio and also Thomas Souček. The next game on Tuesday was our team, Leeds United, playing away at Newcastle United. Steve Bruce's side were on a very bad run of form. So we thought after losing 3 games on the trot that this, if we could get back onto a run of form, this would be it for Leeds United. And we started well. We scored in the 17th minute by Rafinha. Excuse me. And at half-time, it was 1-0. But as we know with Leeds United, it's never easy. And then we fall asleep sometimes. We get caught napping, and Miguel Almiron tied it up in the 57th minute. But 4 minutes later, a beautifully taken volley with a hot and cold player from Jack Harrison gives Leeds all 3 points. But the big thing in that game was Diego Llorente, who we signed for Real Sociedad, finally came back in after being out injured as a centre-back, key signing for us. Him and Robin Koch in the heart of defence have been out for a number of weeks. He went off injured in the 10th minute, and as a Leeds fan, I had to question whether or not Bielsa ball and the what you call murder ball in practice twice a day, doing that after a player comes back from injury, possibly exacerbated the potential for injury, and now he might be out for another 4 to 5 weeks. So glad for Leeds to restore a new run of wins, and that was the first of the week. Newcastle, so I'm going to throw it to both of you. I'm going to start first with you, Rich, on Newcastle's problems until we go to the second game of the week under Steve Bruce. Is it patchy defense? Is it not having enough goal scorers up front that are converting the opportunities? And then on Leeds' side of it, is it the style that gives you, the style of Bielsa ball that gives you 1 week it's a dominant win, and another week we're not taking the chances and we're succumb to the counter attack if we're not scoring on 16 chances, for instance? In this game, we only had 6 shots on goal, only 2 on target, but though for those 2 were converted. So, Rich, give me your thoughts on both Newcastle and then Leeds United.
I think Leeds were very grateful for a 10-day break after coming off that really poor losing run where they. And one of the big inherent problems about Leeds United is they're giving the football away too much. They're giving the ball away stupidly. They're not treating the ball like China. That like it's valuable. I don't like the way they do too much in their own, even in their own penalty area, in their own like quarter, their own fifth of the field. Nevertheless, we had a 10-day break to regroup and whatever he did, Bielsa, and we were fortunate to be playing a team way off form and I think other than the goalkeeper who has saved them in many respects, they're Newcastle are a team down on confidence. You mentioned not having any formidable up front players. I don't know why he doesn't play. I've always rated Carroll. He's a major threat. He's a big lad. He's a strong header of the ball, and I don't know why they insist on he can't do anything. He can't rise for any header if he's on the bench, and so I don't understand that. I think Bruce his days are numbered there, and they did not look a threat. The threat that they offered were because Leeds let them in more than them being creative. But we made a few more chances. We were a little bit better. I know we're not coming on to today's game yet, but they just got a little bit of momentum. Fabulous goal finished by Harrison. We could have a few more. It wasn't, we didn't have, as you say, 25 shots on target.
Goal. In fact, they had 15, Rich. If you look at the game, 15 shots Newcastle had to our 6.
Okay, so we would get back a lot. I wonder what the stats are and how much time, how many, rather than creative play by them, we gave the ball to them.
Yeah, we had 58% possession. They only had 42%, but 15 shots on goal. And in the second half, we were under the cosh. We were under the cosh bad in the second half. And I thought we were lucky to hold out in that game 2-1. When we get to today's game, different story, well deserved. But in that game, Leeds needed that to regain the confidence, like you said. And I think Newcastle, when you look at the game that they had this weekend, I think when we get into that, confidence is needed. All it takes is a win. Get back on the board. You start to get that confidence. I do agree with you with Andy Carroll. They did play him in the previous game. Callum Wilson, he is actually one of the top league scorers. I think he's scored, if I'm not mistaken, I think he's scored 8 goals for the year so far. However, Dwight Gale hasn't been, he was out injured for a while. Andy Carroll's just come back. Ryan Fraser's not really scoring. Almiron scored a few, but they're just really not consistent and they really need that confidence. Let's throw it over to Mike. I want to invite you in, Mike, on Newcastle and your thoughts on Newcastle and then Leeds United and what you like about what they're doing and what you don't like about what they're doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, with Newcastle, like they haven't been a threat since Alan Shearer used to pull the boots on. I mean, seriously, they are in massive trouble. I don't know how they're in the Premier League. A huge club, great heritage, so many unbelievable fans up there, and they just can't put it together. I mean, I don't know what they're doing, but in the sense of Leeds, like lots of mistakes as always with Leeds. It either kind of works, clicks into gear, or it doesn't. They still keep scoring goals, which is what you need to do to win games, of course. And lucky to get away with it. But they're the wins you take, whether you play well or not. And that's what you need to do in the Premier League is take those wins and get them, whether you have to, whatever you have to do to get it done. If it's only 2 shots on target and they're the ones you score, and you don't touch the ball for the rest of the game, sometimes that's what it needs in the middle of the season, Dave. And
that's true.
I just think that it's really synonymous with the season at the moment. With if you look at the stats from this week, and you're probably similar all the way back, is the amount of shots teams are taking at the moment is really high. We'll get to the Burnley-Liverpool, the Burnley-Chelsea game, no doubt, and the number of chances. I mean, unbelievable. And that's what we love as football fans, isn't it? Is watching people prepared to pull the trigger and not try and dance their way through the box and tap it in. So, look, I think lucky one for Leeds. I would just chalk it up to the fact that you got the job done. Maybe a bit weary from murder ball, as you say. Who am I to question Bielsa? But, surely it does some damage to the legs at times and the body, but that's his system. But, I mean, poor old Steve Bruce, it's sad to see, a favourite son up there too. They've got to do something or just prepare for championship football.
Yeah, well, let's see. If we look at the game that we saw a different Newcastle come out and respond on the weekend a few days later. Let's see if that sparks all of a sudden this side to respond. I don't think so long term. I think they should have invested a little bit in some changes in the transfer window, more so. But Leeds, however, I think if we can continue this run of form, we'll see on Wednesday night, and we'll go from there. Let's move on. I want to move on to the next game because, of course, there was multiple games this week, and some of the teams we're talking about had other games coming up. So we'll have a chance to go over more about Leeds United, more about Newcastle later on in the show. Next game was Southampton. You're going to like this one, Mike. Southampton at home to Arsenal on Tuesday night. Southampton dominated possession, 58% possession, 10 shots on goal, but 5 shots on target. Arsenal close, 9 shots on goal, 5 on target. But I watched the game. Besides going behind early to a Stuart Armstrong goal, the Gunners looked better. Pepe equalised in the 8th. Saka, 39th, put him up 2-1. And Lacazette sealed 3 points in the 72nd minute. Last weekend, we were talking about the problems with Aubameyang and Lacazette scoring. That actually made it at the end of the weekend. It was 5 goals in the last 6 games for Lacazette. So he's actually all of a sudden rediscovered that goal scoring form. Aubameyang, if he can come around, if he can come around and score the 20 that we're used to him scoring, Arsenal all of a sudden, if you look at run of form in the last 5 games, Manchester City and then Arsenal, maybe Arsenal potentially could creep back into the top 6, but it's a tightly grouped top 10 where literally even Leeds right now are only 4 points off 6th place. So let me kick it back to you about Arsenal right now. Did you see something that you liked in that game that you hadn't seen in previous games?
Yeah, well, I think there was. Look, I really think Pepe adds something that they don't have when he's not on the field. You know, he's brilliant with the ball. He takes players on. They've always talked about his body size as being a little bit, light on to take the heavy rides in the Premier League. But he's just got that magic, that the top sides need. And you look at City, you look at Liverpool, they've got that magic couple of players in their squad, and it lifts everyone else up. I think Saka is, again, proving what a great young talent that he is.
It's great.
Good to see Lacazette on the goals. Obviously a very, very mature, experienced player now. I think Auber's gone away for compassionate leave, I believe. So
he has, yeah. He didn't play in today's game, yeah.
Yeah. So, look, again, we've got to defend well, but if we're not scoring, it doesn't mean anything. So having that flair up front, I think we miss it when we bring Willian back in. We saw it in the game you'll talk about later, but again, it was a quality player, but he's probably a little bit, past it now, to be fair.
Yeah, not the same with Chelsea, not the same William that we saw at the height of his career, yeah.
Yeah, correct. Look, I really think that, with the FA Cup out of the way and a little bit of revenge, is always handy a few days later on getting knocked out by that team and then beating them. But again, quality team that we beat, but they did look very fluid and they did look like their creativeness was back, which is what Arsenal is really all about.
Great. And Rich, I want to thank you for those points, Mike. I want to ask you, Rich, you probably get exposed to living just outside London. You probably hear from plenty of people about Arsenal, and you probably get a lot.
I live in the Arsenal heartland. I'm right in the middle between Spurs, Arsenal, and Watford. I think Martinello is a fantastic player. I think he's done a lot for Arsenal. The signing of Martin Odegaard, who apparently is meant to be a mentally fantastic player, is going to make a big difference. I think Leno in goal is possibly, apart from the 2 saves that Schmeichel made today, which we'll talk about, Leno's been the great goalkeeper of the Premier League. I think he's head and shoulders, apart from Schmeichel, he's head and shoulders above anybody. I agree with Mike. You Lacazette and Aubameyang, they're the kind of the people who you rely on. But I think you've got your playmakers. I think Martinello and Odegaard, I think, are going to make a big difference to. Martinello's a great player, but Odegaard, his mentor, I don't know much about him, but all the rumours are that he is a fantastic player, and I think Arteta is somebody who's just you've got to give him a bit of time. Lampard was given a year and a half, unlucky, but he came into a good team. Arteta took over a failing, dropping down the table team, and he's just given, hopefully the owners at Arsenal have said, right, you've got a couple of years, get us up to 5th or whatever, by the end of 2 years, and we're in business. And I think they've got there's obviously a lot of great teams in the Premier League who are always strengthening their squads, but Arsenal, with those 4 players plus the keeper, they're the people that are going to make the difference. In my opinion.
Mike, actually, good points, Rich. Mike actually echoed your sentiment about Leno last week when we were on the show, and said he was really sort of one of the most valuable players on that team. And we talked about that defense being key and having a solid keeper. And it brought me back, because it's funny, I was watching a documentary today, little mini clip. It wasn't really a documentary, but a mini clip documentary on Lee Dixon, and it was going back to the time with Lee Dixon in that side with Tony Adams, and he was saying about when he had his first derby, and it was against Spurs, and him, Tony Adams, and one of the other guys had him up against the wall and said, "You are not leaving this. You're not letting us down today, or else you're gonna face it." And having that it had me reminiscing about the olden days with the tough centre backs, having the keepers really solid at the back, whether it was even Kasper Schmeichel's dad, Peter Schmeichel,
Of course.
So I think Leno is one of the most talented keepers. Of course, Kasper Schmeichel today, boy, Leeds could have had another 3 or 4 goals in the game when we get to that game. Let's move on. The last game on Tuesday was West Brom hosting Manchester City. This was an absolute blitzkrieg. Manchester City absolutely destroyed West Brom. 78% possession, 11 shots on goal, 7 on target, 5-0. Gundogan opened the scoring. Actually, no, sorry. Joao Cancelo opened the scoring in the 20th minute, and Gundogan got a brace in the 30th and 60th minute. Riyad Mahrez in the 2nd minute of additional time right before the break, and Sterling in the 57th minute. Wow, West Brom. Wow, West Brom, they've given up so far for this season. If I've got my stat sheet here, I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, 50 goals for the season so far. 50. By far and away the most goals given up by a team. I feel for Big Sam. I really do feel for Big Sam. You either love him or you hate him. But 1 shot on target, you don't really deserve much from that game. Manchester City right now, I think once they got the injured players back, they've got such depth on the bench that you can start Sterling and Mahrez, but literally have Ferran Torres and Gabriel Jesus on the bench, not starting, and you could still win 5-0. And that's the amazing thing. And this is without Sergio Aguero. Who'd have thought that without Sergio Aguero and having Ferran Torres and Gabriel Jesus on the bench, you could literally go out there and score 4, 5, 6 in a game. And I think the first few games of the season, when they were down in 12th place, they had all these injured players. They were rotating at the back too much. They were leaking tons of goals, Manchester City. Right now, with a gap at the top and being in first place at the end of the week, Manchester City are dangerous. I don't see them losing many games. Let's not talk much about West Brom. I know that's going to be a hard thing for West Brom, I think, to survive the drop. Just one quick thing. I'll start off with Mike and then go to Rich. Do you think, either one of you think, can Big Sam pull them out of the bottom of 3, or do you think this team is doomed to face the drop? And also, what's been the big difference for Manchester City regaining the form that we know and expect them to have in the Premier League?
Okay, quick answer at West Brom, no. No chance. Man City, they always say that form is temporary, class is permanent. So for me, the class is there, the depth is there. There's just no way they're not going to be right at the top, if not at the top at the end. It's just the way it is.
And do you think it's having that, probably the biggest depth I've seen up front now that players are coming back healthy? You think it's the depth of squad that they have that gives them the advantage over the other teams like a Liverpool, a Leicester, Spurs, and Manchester United? Is it the depth of squad?
Well, the depth of squad costs the big bucks, doesn't it? What they have is the big bucks, and therefore they have the depth. Okay, they recruit well, and obviously Pep's been doing that for a long time. But if you've got if your second, third, fourth striker is almost as good as your first striker, that's a very, very nice position to be in, isn't it?
It is. It is. Well said, Mike. Rich, what do you think in regards to Big Sam surviving the drop, Manchester City? What's the key to their success besides Pep Guardiola? Is it depth of squad, quality, spend? What is it?
First of all, I think the relegated teams have already decided themselves right now. I think Fulham, Sheffield United, and West Brom are all gone. I don't see any way that's going to change. Just especially the way Brighton, Burnley, and in Newcastle, when their Everton game. I think that's it. So the answer is just very simple: no. Fulham, Sheffield United, West Brom should be getting their Championship badges on their shirts now, just to save a bit of time. In terms of Man City, you've got the best playmaker in the league in De Bruyne. I know he's injured, but he's got them where they've got, and I don't think they'll suffer too much without him. And I think the big test and the big test will be next Sunday, the big one against Liverpool. I think that's going to be. I think that will be a very big marker for who is going to go away with the title. I think if City win, they will go 7 points clear of Liverpool. With a game in hand over them, and
that's with a game in hand. You're right.
They've got a game in hand. They're already 4 points ahead of Liverpool with a game in hand. They'll go 7 points ahead of the game in hand. Liverpool, yes, they've had a couple of wins, but they're still coming off. There's a couple of question marks, and of course they are a little bit lacking at the back of their main players. I know they're bringing some replacements in. They were great. Man City have always been a great team. They were a little bit under the radar earlier on in the season, but they're doing what they need to do, and they're actually a fabulous team to watch. No matter who you support, it's poetry in motion when the way they play. So yeah, I think now they are possibly favourites after next weekend. If they win even a point, as long as they don't lose, if they win or get a point, I would say that's it. It's almost done and dusted. They'll march on from there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think unless they run into an injury crisis, which they faced earlier in the season, I don't see them dropping many points from now until the end of the season. But as we know, in the Premier League, we could see a Liverpool or a Manchester United go on a 15 to 16 game unbeaten run. We never know. And a side start getting points, maybe even if Manchester City doesn't lose, drop points here and there could make it tighter. So I think it will be tighter than we might expect. But you're right. It's a big game coming up next week. So we'll see. Wednesday's games, guys, were Burnley kicked off against Aston Villa. And this was one of the surprising games of the week. Burnley were up against it possession-wise. Aston Villa, 62% possession, 15 shots on goal, a whopping 10 shots on target, and only 5 on target, 8 shots on goal from Burnley. But amazingly enough, Burnley wins 3-2, despite Ollie Watkins and Jack Grealish getting on the scoreboard for Villa. A Ben Mee score in the 52nd minute after Burnley were trailing at halftime 1-0. Dwight McNeil put them ahead, and in the 76th minute, and 3 minutes later, ex-Leeds striker Chris Wood made it 3-2 to Burnley, and a shock Burnley win. However, Burnley are one of those sides that sometimes they've proven that when you go in and you take things for granted, Burnley is one of those sides that can upset you. Interesting. Aston Villa, they had a few games in hand. A couple of games ago, they had a couple of games in hand, and I think they've blown it. Aston Villa had a chance at some point to move up to, I think it was as high as 3rd place. And at the end of the weekend, you'll see them not be in the top 6. So we won't talk too much about them, except I want to get your opinion on Aston Villa. Do either one of you think that Aston Villa will make it into the top 6, or do you think they're a mid-table team? And I'll go with Mike first on this one.
Yeah, thanks, David. I think that they'll be top 10's probably pretty safe. Somewhere in the middle of that, maybe 7, 8. It's pretty packed space though, isn't it? And you can see that it's a really interesting. It's such a great season, I think, because we've got Aston Villa, you've got West Ham, you've got Everton, you've got Leicester, you've got these clubs that traditionally have been middle to bottom half of the table, all really pushing and showing something different. And I look quickly on Aston Villa. I think they can do it. They've got super talent, as we discussed last week. Yep. They've just had a little bit of a dip, but that's the Premier League. It's tough, isn't it? Tough every week.
It is. You saw that, and I think Rich could have testified to this. We saw that against Leeds United, where we thumped them pretty convincingly. And yet, here's a Villa side that beat Liverpool 7-2 earlier in the year. So it's Jekyll and Hyde a bit. I do like the fact that Ollie Watkins, Jack Grealish, and Ross Barkley are just so wonderful to watch. I think they just give up too much at the back. They sometimes fall asleep at the back. Lack of discipline and susceptible at defence. Rich, what's your take on Aston Villa before we move on to the Chelsea Wolves game?
Grealish is absolutely the deal. He may be a bit of a misbehaving lad off the field, but I like a lot of more. But he's the absolute deal. I saw Ollie Watkins play for Brentford against Barnet a couple of years ago in the FA Cup, and you could tell he was a class above everybody else on that football field. You knew he was going to get signed, but by a really decent club. Fabulous natural footballer. I think, I agree totally with Mike there. 7, 8, 9. One of those places will go to Aston Villa. I think it's gonna. I just don't think they're quite there for Europe yet, but they're not. They're going to knock on the door. It's going to be very, as Mike says, it's going to be tight. It's packed already in that little 6th to 10th. There's not a lot of points between those teams. So difficult to say. They're definitely top 10. I don't think they're top 6.
Yeah, and I think we all can agree on that. And in fact, as we said before, at the end of the weekend, it's a 4-point spread between 12th place and 6th place. So 4 points between 12th place and 6th place. So quite packed. I've never seen the Premier League this packed at this point in the season. Chelsea, listen, we had this was weird because last weekend's show, it was Mike, myself, and Darren, and we were talking whether or not Frank Lampard deserved to stay on, and we thought in general that he deserved some extra time. And then literally, what was it, the next day? Was it that day or within 24 hours he was sacked. So listen, Thomas, I think coming in, Thomas Tuchel, I think he's a good manager. He had good, he did well when he was over at PSG. I think he'll right the ship. I think, was it premature on Frank Lampard? We were wondering whether or not it's the results or whether or not he'd lost control in terms of the back room and the back staff and maybe his players. So it was a pretty boring game, but we talked about, Mike brought up something about converting, and this is Chelsea under Lampard, and I think Thomas Tuchel, and I never say his right name, so I don't know if you pronounce it Tuchel or Tuchel, but I don't know. Do you know how to pronounce his name? Is it Tuchel?
I think it's Tuchel.
Tuchel. Okay, good. So somebody that knows the pronunciation. So Tuchel, I think he'll come in, but he's going to have the same threat, in my opinion, that they have 10 to 15 shots on goal, and yet they're not getting the conversion rate, Chelsea. And so if they can turn that corner, I think getting the backs tightened up, I think when Mendy came in, I thought he was a fantastic signing. I thought he tightened up the back four, and I think he's a terrific keeper. They've lost the discipline in recent games at the back, and for me, Werner has been really disappointing at converting the opportunities that he's had, and they've rotated a lot in attack. They had 10 shots on goal, 5 shots on target. It was 0-0. Wolves, a big fat 0 when it comes to on target shots, only 4 on target. Is this really the Wolves that we saw a year ago? Is it really missing?
It took Leeds United apart not that long ago.
Absolutely, took Leeds United apart. So you wonder, Raul Jimenez, yes, massive miss, but he shouldn't define that squad. And so I start to wonder, are Wolves going to continue to slide down the table? Quick thing on both Chelsea and Wolves, because we'll have a chance to get back to them later in the show. Rich, you go first, and then Mike.
Yeah, I think the Chelsea management job is obviously poison chalice. At least Lampard, he's going to walk away with $5.5 million, so don't feel too sorry for him. It's not too awful in terms of his reputation, his job. I think it's very unlucky. I don't think he's anything wrong. I think Chelsea are. Yeah, listen, with a German manager and those 2 German players, that they think they're going to get more out of them because of that German cultural thing. I don't know. I think to give somebody a year and a half is a bit ridiculous. We've given you've got the Liverpools and your Man Cities and now a resurgent, somewhat Man United up there. I think Chelsea are always a 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th team at the moment. I don't think, and so if you don't have to go back maybe 30 years ago when Ferguson was one shot away from being sacked when Man U were about and. I can't remember exactly what happened. They scored a goal, or they didn't concede, and they got another game. They won. It was an FA Cup game, I think, and he was there for the next 25 years. So I think managers aren't given any leeway. They're sacked to changing candy or whatever it is, and it's a bit ridiculous. So Tuchel will be enjoying. He's got employment. I feel sorry for Lampard. He'll get a job somewhere. So that's Chelsea. I haven't seen them for a couple of weeks, actually. I have to admit, so I don't know how they played. Wolves, they are another. We talked about inconsistent teams. They are inconsistent. They were more consistent now. It's again a nucleus of a Portuguese squad with a Portuguese manager. So there should be some synergy between management and players.
Yep.
To have lost it, I think it's just a momentum thing, which we talked about. They probably may have had a bit of some piece of luck or against them that just dropped their heads and dropped their momentum, and it's an easy slide down from there. It's a lot about confidence and momentum, and I don't think either Chelsea particularly, they may gradually get that back, but I don't think their fans have got anything to cheer about much this year, to be honest.
I agree with you, and before I kick it over to Mike, I think I wonder if sometimes you have a talisman in the dressing room, a leader that keeps that nucleus pulled together and gels everything and really gets the morale up. Was Raul Jimenez that guy? Because ever since he's gone out injured, they've gone on, I don't know if it's coincidence, but they've gone on this slide. And really, Nieto hasn't had the run of form that I thought he'd have. And Traore, while he's a physical guy and he's fairly pacey, and Leeds were trying to get him in this transfer window, they just haven't done it. Mike, what do you think the thing is with both? Quick thing on Chelsea, and then because we'll go back to them later in the week with the second game under Tuchel. What do you think it is with Wolves?
Yeah, I've been wondering about this a lot. I talk to my oldest son about this all the time. He studies the game, and he just puts it down to the fact that that's their talisman striker gone, and they got nothing without him. I don't think it's that simple. Look, I watched that game live because against Arsenal when he had that horrific head clash with David Luiz.
With David Luiz,
and I was and I was
Shocking.
sitting there I was in my living room. I felt sick in the stomach, right? Just watching this poor guy on the ground for so long. I don't know what it was, 15 minutes or something until they could stabilise him and get him off.
Yeah,
I think
about 12 to 15 minutes.
Yeah. The Wolves players all standing around their man down, I really think that's something about that moment that's gone into their psyche they haven't gotten over, because since that incident, they've just been woeful. They almost look like they don't want to be there. And that's not the Wolves we've known over the last couple of years. They've been such an exciting squad to watch coming through. And I just think it's not skill. It's not, the ability to go and play the way they would for their coach, though they clearly love. It's something psychological for mine, because you just can't explain it. On Chelsea, I mean, if you are going to accept the job from Roman, I think you better be getting ready to start spending your early severance package, from the day you start, because, he's just ruthless, isn't he? And there's a great quote by Jose at the start of this year when he took the Tottenham job, and they said, in previous times you've said you'll never coach Tottenham. What changed your mind? And he said, the minute Roman sacked me, so he has the form, he has the money. It's his club. He does what he likes, and that's the way it is, wrong or right. But like Richard said, Frank will be fine. Obviously, huge, massive pedigree in football, couple of extra $1 million in the bank, and he'll move on. But you'll see in the next game on Chelsea what's really going to start to happen there, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I think when we get to that game, there's some good talking points. Let's move on. Thank you, Mike and Richard. Let's move on to Everton versus Leicester. Now, Everton's lost their way. For me, Everton and Southampton in the first 6 games were the hottest sides. They had the best start to the seasons. And since then, it's been a mixed bag, really, for Everton as well as Southampton. And we talked about Southampton a little bit earlier. 65% possession to Leicester, 35% possession to Everton, 9 shots on goal for Leicester, 6 for Everton. It ended up being 1-1. James Rodriguez, one of my favourite strikers, however, hasn't really discovered that scoring form that we're used to seeing him in even recent years, say as recently as 3 or 4 years ago. They were 1-0 up at half time, but Tielemans, he scored against Leeds. He's a dangerous player. I think Tielemans in the first game against Leeds, not the game that was just played on the weekend, he equalised in the 67th minute. One thing that I saw in regards to Leicester is that without Vardy, it's a tough one. It's a tough one without Vardy. Do you get the same threat up front? You have Harvey Barnes. For me, Ayaz Perez Gutierrez is not the answer. Without Vardy, he's a massive miss. I'd say he's as big a miss of any striker on any team when he's out, bar none, I think. Everton, Leicester, quick thing. We're not going to spend much time on these guys. Everton, take on Everton. Mike first, then Rich.
Yeah, look, it's one of those interesting ones, isn't it? Because they're both having had reasonable seasons, obviously Leicester especially, and a little bit uninspiring. But you as Leicester, you just need Vardy there, don't you? You've got to have Vardy if you really want to challenge for that, let's say, second spot. So I mean, I thought I was going to get a better game out of that one, to be honest. And
it was a flat game.
Didn't really,
very flat game. Did you either of two see the game?
Is that the one where the Pickford made the mistake from the shot? Was that game? I can't remember, because what I was going to say was, I think Pickford is one of the big problems with Everton. He keeps playing him, and I think he's playing with a lack of confidence. He's making mistakes. Some he's getting away with, some he's not. And you've got to be strong. He is not an England goalkeeper for me. He never has been. And he may, goalkeepers, having been one for 50 years, it's not about shot stopping. It's about positioning and having that innate ability of where to position yourself. I don't like the way they're all punching, but that's another story. But I don't think there's an intuitive way that Pickford plays that will bring confidence to the back four. And I think
Yeah, I agree with you. I think
the other thing I was going to say is Calvert-Lewin's gone off. I think the other thing I was going to say is Calvert-Lewin's gone off. I just don't think he was absolutely number one striker in the division at the beginning of the year, but he seems to have gone off.
Yeah, he was 11 goals. I think he'd already scored his 11th goal by the 10th game, I think it was.
He was on a mental streak.
Yeah, he was on an absolutely mental streak, and that's dried up. And I think since then, Everton has slid down the table.
I like Ancelotti. I think he's a good manager, and he looks like he's a decent bloke. But I think they've got a few confidence issues there. In terms of Leicester, missing Vardy is a big deal for them. They have got some good players, I think, but they, and I've never been a massive fan of Brendan Rodgers, but anyway, I think they miss Vardy. I think they've got some great players. Harvey Barnes is a great player. They have got some good players.
Madison, I think.
Yeah, of course.
When he's on, he's a very good player.
Yeah. But you think if you look at teams like Spurs and Kane and Leicester and Vardy, a team cannot rely on one person to. That's not a strength in depth team. So they are the teams that aren't going to do brilliantly at the end of the season because you can't account for a player going through the season not being injured.
Yeah, good point, Rich. Mike, your thoughts on that in terms of Everton, their problems, and Leicester's in this game? Leicester itself, they're without Vardy, big impact. I think what Rich said was very appropriate. Teams like Leicester and Spurs are so dependent on strikers like Vardy and Kane that when they get injured or they're out for whatever reason, whether it's COVID, whether it's injuries, big miss, probably the biggest of any teams.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Pretty much everything Richard said was spot on the money. Those key points about the strikers and also Pickford. But look, it's like a business, isn't it? If you've only got one revenue stream and one product line, that's a massive risk, And it's the same thing in a football club. One striker that's winning you all the games, that's a problem.
And if your sole revenue stream is gone, yep, that makes sense. So that was the game that almost finished up to Wednesday night. We did have one other game, and that was the shocker on Wednesday night. Manchester United, I'm going to love this one. Manchester United playing Sheffield United. And I couldn't believe my eyes. I watched that game, and 9 shots on goal, 76% possession for Manchester United at home, although they were unbeaten in 17 games away from home. This is so different, this Manchester United side. They lose 2-1, and yet it's the home form this year that's hurting them. You think back to the Ferguson days, and that was a fortress. Old Trafford was absolute fortress, just like Ellen Road under Don Revie. And Manchester United loses to Sheffield United now. Sheffield United, I'm still amazed. They went up. They scored a pretty good goal. If you watch the game, Keane Bryan scored a good goal in the 23rd minute. And Ollie Burke scored the winner after Harry Maguire had equalised in the 64th minute for Man U. Shocking. Only 3 shots on target for Sheffield United, but they win 2-1. And if I look on all they had, really, Sheffield United, they had Sharp, McGoldrick and Bryan come off the bench. They started, off the bench. Ollie Burke scored the winner. Perfect timing. Probably the best timing of subs so far for Sheffield United in the season. Chris Wilder finally making a good decision. They win 2-1 over Manchester United. Explain this shocker, Rich first, and then Mike.
It was a blip. Simple as that. It was a blip. It was a one-off. It was a wall of pink.
We're having a hard time hearing you. I think the mic is. You're having problems with your mic there in terms of volume.
If I get a bit closer, is that a bit better there for David?
That's good. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Sorry, man. So what I was going to say, it was a blip. It was a bit of a one-off. There was a wall of pink, and Man U weren't creative enough to get through. There were, Cavani came on and tried his best, but I just don't think I like to see him in from the start. I think Pogba's got his mojo back, and when Shaw came on, he looked like he could have inflicted something. I think maybe Ollie thought, oh, we've got a fairly easy one here. As Rio Ferdinand said on the TV, oh, we're definitely going to win this. So there may have been a little bit of complacency. I think we can just look at it as a one-off. I don't think it's worth spending too much time on that game.
Yeah, great. And you have the same opinion, you think, Mike? You think it's a one-off?
Dave, I seriously hope not.
Me too.
Yeah, and game of the week for me, absolutely loved it. I've been telling all my United fans how woeful they are, and they're finally proving the type of team that they are. So obviously, don't get too upset, all United fans. I'm an Arsenal supporter, so I've got to say that. But yeah, move on. There's not much to say. Sheffield did it really well, and they got the points.
Yeah, let's move on. And coming from a Gunners fan and a Whites fan, you're going to get some grief, Red Devils fans out there. So we enjoyed it. You might not have enjoyed it, but we'll move on to Thursday's game. And that was a cracker. That was Spurs at home to Liverpool. Liverpool really needed to rebound and get back moving up the table. Spurs, as of late, haven't seen it happening. And I think it's going to be tougher for them, obviously, now that Harry Kane with damaged ligaments. We'll see how long he's going to be out. That's going to be a massive miss. It was half time, and it was 1-0. Bobby Firmino, he put them up in the 4th minute of added time, just before half time. Trent Arnold made it 2-0 in the 47th minute. However, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, he put them, pulled one back for Spurs in the 49th minute. And one of my favourite players for Liverpool, who I've been disagreeing with some people about, does he deserve to be on? Does Salah versus Salah? We talked about this last week, Mike, and we had a bit of a disagreement maybe with Darren on this one. But Sadio Armani, for me, is one of the critical players that needs to be starting, I think. However, you can't ignore when, for instance, this week's game, the second game of the week, when Salah gets the brace, but Sadio Mane needs to be playing regularly, and he hadn't missed a game until we get to the next game. Spurs lose this. What is the thing with Spurs right now? And I'll go with you, Mike, and then kick it to Richard. What is the thing with Spurs, and have Liverpool righted the ship?
I'm not sure what's going on with Spurs, because they were really clicking at the start of the season. They were really clicking, and Kane's a big blow. They seem to have lost their way a little bit. But, just quickly on Liverpool, I mean, what a cracking game. Great game to watch. As I said before about Man City, form can be temporary, class is permanent. And you can see the way that Liverpool are responding. I think it's not that they've righted the ship. They've righted the ship. Maybe that's the right way to say it. Yep.
Yeah, great. Rich, you think the same in terms of some of the points that Mike just brought up?
Yeah, I agree with Mike. I think Salah is also getting back to his best. Alexander-Arnold is also doing really well. I think they had a little bit of a blip. I think with that 1-0 loss at home to Burnley, wasn't it? They lost, I think, a week or two ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they had a few losses recently, and they've slid down the table. They're now in 6th place. They were in 1st place. If you move back a few weeks back, we're talking maybe about 5 weeks back, and Spurs were in 1st place. Yeah. They've really had a bit of a slide recently.
Yeah, I think we're not going to see Spurs get any better, any quicker, especially without Kane. Son looked completely. We'll talk about today's game later, but he looked so out of his, on his own and out of his depth without his friend. But in terms of Liverpool, absolutely back on it. They outclassed Spurs, and when Kane went off second half, they were just nothing to, very little to offer. I think they've got some good players. I like Moura. I think they have got some penetrating players, but they can't cope with that one player. Without Kane, it's not good.
Yeah, I think Lucas Moura, for me, should be used more. He comes off the bench and he's used sparingly by Mourinho, but I think that's been a mistake, to be honest with you. And I'm not really convinced of Gareth Bale being back at the side. I think a big mistake.
He's got no enthusiasm. He looks like he don't want to be there. Just give me 600 grand, and I'm.
Yeah, he just wants to take the money and then go back to Spain and sit on the beach, I think. But
or go to Hadleywood Golf Club.
Yeah, let's move on to Saturday's games. There was a bunch of games on Saturday, and second game of the week for most of these sides. Everton were at home to Newcastle. This was a good one, really, for Newcastle. They needed this after losing to Leeds. Despite having a great second half against Leeds in terms of pressure, they ended up losing that game. Newcastle come back. They win 2-0 away from home, a brace by Callum Wilson. I really like Callum Wilson. I think he's a talented young striker. That makes it 10 goals for the season and 4 assists in 19 games played for Callum Wilson. So he's one of those young strikers that really doesn't get mentioned when you talk about the top scorers in the league. And yet I think he's got great pace. He's got a great eye for goal. And I'm really happy for Steve Bruce that Newcastle takes the 3 points. For Everton, they did have 9 shots on goal. Calvert-Lewin, as Rich said earlier in the show, I think he's lost his confidence in front of goal. They started Richarlison, Calvert-Lewin. One of our best friends, Ian, we talked about this last week in the show. His wife's biological cousin is Alex Iwobi, and I think Alex Iwobi just hasn't really performed up to his standards and the amount of money they spent on Alex. So maybe if they rediscover form up front, but look at the goals lately, they're just not scoring enough goals, and that's it. And any quick thing on Everton, or should we move on that? Any thoughts? We should move on that.
We said it before.
Yep. Next game was Crystal Palace. They were 1-0 winners over Wolves. Crystal Palace, we haven't really talked about much, but to be honest with you, Eze scored in the 60th minute. They had 8 shots on goal, only 2 on target. Wolves had 4 on target, but we already talked about the deficiencies at Wolves. Crystal Palace, I think, are one of those up and down squads. They beat Leeds 4-1, and then another week they lose 5-2. So which Palace team shows up on the day? It's like rolling the dice, really. The next game was Manchester City. They were 1-0 winners at Sheffield United. I watched the game and I thought, listen, there's a greater gap in terms of depth and quality in the Man City versus Sheffield United squads. But Gabriel Jesus in the 9th minute put them up. They hold on to win 1-0. Really not much to say about that one. That was expected. I do feel for Wilder's side, Chris Wilder, but too much class difference in my opinion on that. West Brom were up next. They were in a really, I thought, one of the most entertaining games in the bottom 3 in terms of football watching. And I thought it was a fantastic game. Bobby Reid pulled Fulham up in the 10th minute, only for Kyle Bartley, one of the ex-Leeds United players, equalised to make it 1-1. Matthias Pereira put West Brom up 2-1. I thought it was theirs for the taking. Cavallero tied it up to make it 2-2. It stayed that way. Interesting thing with the rotation with Fulham is that they'd been tinkering around with the strikers. Mitrovic tried to get his confidence back. He's not doing it. They started him. They still got Loftus-Cheek and Lookman up front. But for me, both sides are very, very similar. They're giving up too many goals and they're not scoring up front. Arsenal, one of the biggest expected games of the week, and I thought it was a bit of a disappointment. We're going to focus on Arsenal versus Manchester United. I'd like to start it with Rich and then obviously turn it to Mike because Mike being a lifelong Arsenal fan. I watched this game, ton of shots on goal, 11 shots for Arsenal, 11 shots for Manchester United. To me, it felt like it was going to stay a stalemate. It was destined to be a stalemate. How Cavani missed that. I mean, the three of us could literally put a blindfold on in the same position and score. How did Cavani miss two sitters? Arsenal have to consider themselves lucky that Cavani was absolutely off in front of goal. Rich, you go.
Yeah, I think you've got two teams that are at the moment probably lacking a little bit of confidence. But although Man U, it was weird how they got to the top of the table, almost by. Can you hear me, Dave?
Yeah, just turn up the volume a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't know how Man U have made it to the top of the table. Neither team are playing with massive confidence. I think Leno made a couple of saves. I did see the game, but not in detail. It was on and off. I didn't totally watch it. I think you're right. Even though there were shots on targets, it did have a fairly stalemate feel about the game. But probably hand it over to Mike, who may have seen, given being an Arsenal fan, probably had a bit more of an in-depth opinion about the game.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rich.
Funny thing is, I didn't even watch the game. It was, a real game of missed opportunity, wasn't it? So probably,
I watched the game, watched the whole game, and it was just, I'm like, wow, there were literally great moments of quality from both teams. And when it came to the final third, I'm thinking nobody's going to break the deadlock. And then two sitters, literally, it came across goal. And Cavani ran in, he ran onto the ball, and literally he was from 4 yards out. And he had that goal just literally, all he had to do was just direct it. And Leno would have had no chance, and he missed it. And then literally about less than 10 minutes later, same thing. Opportunity from about 6 yards out, and he missed it. It finished 0-0. Arsenal and Man U. Arsenal on the right trajectory. Right now, they're in 10th place. But again, they're only 3 points. I think it was 3 points, if I'm not mistaken. They're actually, no. Yeah, they are 2 points. Currently, Arsenal are sitting in 10th. They're only 2 points from Spurs. They have played a game more than Spurs, and right below them, Leeds, and the other side's below them. But they're only 2 points from 6th place. So I wouldn't lose heart. Man United are in 2nd place right now. They have played one more game than Manchester City, who have a 3-point advantage in 1st place. Last game of the Saturday was Southampton against Aston Villa. It was a 1-0 win for 1-0 win for Aston Villa. Aston Villa redeeming themselves after having lost earlier in the week. Ross Barkley scoring in the 41st minute. Another example of Southampton, 11 shots on goal. Danny Ings started, Nathan Redmond, Stuart Armstrong, and they cannot find a way to score a goal. I don't know why, in terms of the rotation, for me, Shea Adams needs to be in there. Theo Walcott, at least if these strikers like Nathan Redmond are not converting, take them off, rotate, get somebody on, make the changes sooner. I think Southampton have lost the plot. Let's move on to today's.
Very David, there was a header that was handled by, was it Cash, which could not given as a handball because he came off his hip first. That was a ridiculous situation. That was a goal. It was going in.
It was going in, and that
would have been 1-1, and that would have made it a fair game, fair score, in my opinion.
But Rich is right. When it came to possession, when it came to fair, it should have been some of these decisions in this week. We haven't even touched VAR decisions, and non-VAR decisions this week were shocking. 60% possession to Southampton. They had more shots on goal. Should they have gotten a point from the game? Yes, but they didn't. And unfortunately, we move on to today's game. And the games for today, we had some crackers. I have to say that because, of course, being a Leeds United fan, I'm glad that it was a really good Sunday for Leeds fans out there. Chelsea were at first up. It was Chelsea against Burnley. Chelsea found their first win underneath. Hold on. Okay, so let's wrap up quickly the games for today. On Sunday, you had Chelsea 2-0 winner over Burnley. First win for Tuchel. Thanks to not the strikers, but Azpilicueta, he scored, and the other defender, Marcus Alonso, they were responsible for the 2 Chelsea goals. The good thing is they tightened up at the back. They didn't give up any goals. They kept a clean sheet. Burnley, no shots on target. Absolutely horrible. Why they started Martin Vidra, I have no idea. Put Jay Rodriguez on in the 57th minute to no avail. They stay in the bottom half of the table. One of the games of the day for me and my esteemed friend is the Leeds victory over Leicester. Leicester were playing host to Leeds United. 3-1 winners, Leeds United away from home. I thought, oh my God, here we go again. Harvey Barnes puts Leicester up in the 13th minute. I thought, here we go again. Another sleep moment against the top 6. We have not won against a top 6 side for the season until today. Stuart Dallas with a great ball put through by Rafinha. He makes no mistake. He equalises. Patrick Bamford with an absolute corker of a goal in the 70th. He is put through on goal in the 84th minute. And instead of scoring, he squares it unselfishly to Jack Harrison. Big 3 points for Leeds. I'm absolutely ecstatic. The only thing is we did lose Rafinha and Rodrigo to injury. Rodrigo going off early, replaced by Matthias Klick, and Rafinha replaced in the 84th minute by Costa. And Bamford limped off after the final whistle, but that was a dead leg. So coming up on Wednesday night, we'll see how Leeds rebound. One of your last thoughts before we just give you the scores for the last 2 games, Rich, on Leeds United, and your thoughts on the game.
So it was a great game to watch. Leeds definitely got their mojo back, playing some really expansive, typical Bielsa football, on the floor triangles, which we all know and love, and the way that they've played this year, which has been fantastic to watch. Scored a lot of goals, but likewise, we're conceding a lot of goals because of losing the ball, and Harvey Barnes' first goal was due to really poor non-marking defending and defence and letting them through. So, and as I said before, without Vardy, we were a bit lucky because I think we would have been punished more. We have to be tighter at the back, otherwise we're going to consider. At one point we'd scored 30 and let in 30. I'm not entirely sure what the numbers are now, maybe 36, 37 or whatever it is. But we do look good. We scored some good goals. We got our mojo back. So it was a great game of football. And Bamford's finish and his 2 assists, made him man of the match easily for me. I think it looked to me like Rodrigo got a groin injury. That could be a 3 or 4 week job. I don't know what the latest is. And Rafinha looked also, it was a top of the leg injury, so that will be worrying because they are our 2 playmakers who are fantastic footballers. But we can't, as I said before, you can't rely on 1 or 2 players to play your team. You've got to have strength in depth. Anyway, it was a great game and obviously great to watch. As a Leeds fan, it was fantastic. But yeah, you're right. I think the Everton game is going to be a tough game on Wednesday. It's going to be very important to see how we get on.
I think we'll fare well against Everton because I think Everton have had problems scoring up front recently. Leeds, if they convert their chances like today, we only had 7 shots on goal, but every single one of them was on target, which is unusual for a Leeds team. I think a good point, what you said about missing Vardy, and I do agree with you with the marking. I thought that Luke Ayling sometimes leaves too much space on one-on-one marking, and I think it leaves too many opportunities for them to come in and maybe unpressed and go from a distance. Good points, Rich. Mike, in terms of your thoughts on Leeds United over Leicester City in this game, and then we'll give you the final two scores for the day.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that game's why we love football, right? I mean, Leicester's right at the top. Leeds have a style of play. We know they're going to leak goals, but they're going to score more, hopefully most of the time. And they came out and they played the way their coach trains them to play, you know? And that's exciting to see goals in the net, mistakes, but goals, and Leeds roll on in this exciting fashion. So I think it was brilliant.
Yeah, appreciate it. And, really excited. And if it wasn't for what Rich brought up early on, Kasper Schmeichel pulled off some absolutely top draw saves. I'm talking world-class saves. And it proves that we miss him at Leeds United, but we do have a fine young 20-year-old keeper in Meslier, and I think Meslier is just going to keep getting better and better. Last two games for the weekend were West Ham. Rich is not sure about Meslier, whether he'll be the answer. I don't think if we want to move on in the summer and get big additions, we need a top-rate keeper that has experience and is a world-class keeper. But one to develop for the future, no doubt, is Meslier for sure. West Ham were up next. The last two games were West Ham versus Liverpool. Liverpool needed to get back on scoring form. The first game since the 7-2 defeat to Aston Villa, that Sadio Mane did not start or play. So I was surprised that he did not start. Mo Salah brace in the 57th and 68th minute. Wijnaldum made it 3-0 until 6 minutes before time. And then 3 minutes before time, Craig Dawson got a consolation goal for the Hammers. One thing I have to say, or the quick thing on this game, I've noticed a stat which is shocking. 12 games, in the season, Liverpool have played 21 games, This is the 12th different starting centre-back partnership they've started since the beginning of the season. That's the 12th different centre-back partnership since the beginning of the season. And Nathaniel Phillips, Nat Phillips, and Jordan Henderson, I have to give credit to Jordan Henderson, absolutely sterling job from somebody that's not a natural centre-back. And I think until they get the big boy back, I think you stick with Nat Phillips and Jordan Henderson. Don't tinker with it. It worked. They started in the second half of the Spurs game. Stick with Nat Phillips. Move Jordan Henderson to centre-back. That will get you in the top two at the end of the season. That's my opinion. Quick thing on that, and then we'll cover the last game. Do you think that is the answer for Liverpool? Give Phillips and this tinkering of putting Jordan Henderson in centre-back? Do you think that's the answer, Rich?
Honestly, I don't know. I think he's getting a new kid on loan coming from Preston, is it?
Yeah, they signed Davis from Preston, and I think if and listen, having a natural centre back in there, that's a great signing. This guy for £2 million, that is an amazing piece of business. This kid is a good young talent. I think that, but Jordan Henderson, if you need him, put him back in there. And Nat Phillips, I think, is a young guy you want to stick with for a while.
Yeah, very possible. Very possible.
And what do you think about that in terms of Liverpool? Do you think that's the answer, or do you think they need to continue to rotate at centre-back? Mike?
Yeah, Jordan Henderson, class player, smart player, leader on the park. I would say stick with that as long as you can. You just got to keep winning, Liverpool. So,
yeah, great. So last game of the week was Brighton against Spurs, and probably the shock of the week for most people, other than the the defeat of Manchester United at the hands of the Blades. Probably those two were the biggest shocks of the week. Brighton upsetting Spurs. Leandro Trossard scoring in the 17th minute. A massive miss. Spurs look anemic without Kane. I mean, really anemic. Richard, you mentioned it earlier. Mike mentioned it to some degree. They tried to take Bale off in the 61st minute, put Lucas Moura on. It didn't do the job. Son looks lost without his brother. So that was it. To summarize the game, last comments from both Mike and Richard. I'll give you the last word, starting off with you, Mike.
Yeah, look, a massive week in football. That's why we love the game. So many things happened that no one expected. Lots of goals, lots of mistakes, and lots of intrigue. And I think that's what makes football such a special game. And for me, it just marches on, doesn't it? So no one can really predict what's going to happen next week because it turns out to be wrong most of the time at the moment.
Yeah, I think especially in the second half of this season, my predictions were spot on for the first few weeks. I was rarely losing games when I was doing a preview show, and then I did a review show. Since we've gone through this format, if I'd made predictions before the games in the last 3 weeks, there is no way I would have even got close to even 75% correct predictions because it's been that type of season. Rich, last words to go to you, my friend.
So I thought the Brighton Spurs game for me was the best game of the whole week. I absolutely loved that game. I thought it was brilliant to watch. And I tell you what, Brighton defied their league position because they played some beautiful football again, similar to Leeds on the ground. Maupay and some of the other players were really
Solly March, Trossard,
March, and I love that. I love that kid McAllister, the Argentinian Scot.
Yep.
What a fantastic player he was. And of course, Connolly should have made it. Or Connolly, he had an absolute sitter and a fantastic block by Alderweireld. You have to give him credit. But they made a brilliant, they played superbly well. Spurs, they had a couple of chances. They did create, but they were missing Kane. But overall, a great week of football. And, everything's in their melting pot.
It is. And thank you both for coming on to the show. We're on to some good, exciting football. We'll make it shorter next time, and it won't be as late, hopefully, your time in the UK. Thank you for joining us, Mike and Rich. It's in the morning, probably now, actually. It's reaching close to noon your time, Mike, in Melbourne. And Rich, it's very late by you, early in the morning. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day. We'll catch you soon, hopefully. Have a great week ahead, and let's look forward to some more Premier League action midweek.